Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushenu b'mitzvotav v'tzovenu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord, our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us in his commandments and commanded us to engross ourselves in the words of the Torah. This week's Torah portion is not like the world's ideas, philosophical, esoterical. It is not like the words of ego. Though this idea does truly exist. It is not so much that that a believer tries to be right, to be in control. It's times we can feel like we have multiple personalities. At times we can literally come through so much, like Jacob did in this Torah portion. This Torah portion speaks much of Joseph, and it speaks of Jacob, and it also speaks of Judah and Tamar. It's good to remember the verse John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. Whoever believes in him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the only Son of God. Jacob sends his son to his brothers. His brothers are in the land of Shinar. His brothers don't like Jacob because of his words, because of his father's love for him, because his brothers feel like they have an inferiority complex. No. It's it's a travesty. It's selfish, but it's a mutilation to the soul to think that we're lesser than any other of God's creatures, of any other person. To think that we should be degraded in any way to somebody else. It's an offense to the soul. We were all made equal in the eyes of God. Some vessels are made for honor, some vessels are made for dishonor. But we were all loved equally before God. And it's true that God shines brightest in the most broken vessels. So he goes. And his brothers hated him. And they beat him, and they took him, and they took his coat off him, and they threw him in a pit. And they sold him to Ishmaelites. And then from the Ishmaelites he was sold by I think it was the Edomites or the Midianites to and don't quote me on it, read it for yourself, to the Egyptians. And to the Egyptians he was sold to Potiphar, the Egyptian. And in Potiphar's house he was accused of trying to do some sexual sin to Potiphar's wife, who in fact was trying to seduce him for a very long time, but he wouldn't do this to her. So he ended up running out of the place naked and was accused of something he didn't do. This all seems very mysterious to us. From ego to the spirit. What's the difference? One denies the total existence, turns his back, wills that he should know, tries to throw into a pit, tries to degrade, tries to shame, to tear off any resemblance of the love of the soul, to not the the idea of being less, of feeling less, not understanding why. The truth is that, like this verse in John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son. And what does Joseph say when his father says, go out to your brothers, who he knows hates him, who he knows is in the land of Shinar, the very same land that Simon and Levi convinced their brothers to murder an entire village. They're in the same land, in their selfishness, the town is in fear of them. People are in fear of them. They're the big shots. It's like an old Western film where the lone cowboy, the nice little the little good kid walks into the town. You'd call him the preacher's son. He walks into the town and he goes into the bar to go get his rebellious brothers. And they run that town. They're bandits and criminals in that town. The whole town's in fear of them. It's not the same scene. It's not some big, dark, musky traveler coming in from the journey to robbing a bank. He's not from the world. He's the most beloved son of his father. He's Joseph, the coat of many colors. He's his father's boy. He's Israel's son, from his loved wife, Rachel. He's the son that the Lord showed. This is him. The one he's been looking to build a house for. He's that son, his house. He's that hope and that promise that he sees for the future in God's plan. And these cowboys pull their guns and draw them on him and tear his coat off, throw him in the pit, and sell him to the Egyptians. Verse 17 of John 3:17. God did not send his son to the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. You look at the picture. With Abraham it looked like a mountain. Faith was mysterious. It was something big. God's plan was something big, and it was in the distance. It was mysterious. He had faith, believed. It was counted unto him righteousness. And he said, "The Lord, here am I," in essence. And he always went. He obeyed the Lord. To Isaac it was like a field, like a fruitful field. It's like a field faith was. When Isaac was asked to get on the altar, his father Abraham, he said, "Here am I." He had faith. And when Jacob left, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, when he left and he had nothing and he laid his head down, leaving the house for his life, running from a Khan, coming in between places, in the middle of the wilderness, laying his head on a rock, he saw a ladder come down. He said, "This is none other than the house of God." To him it was a house. And now Joseph, he sees a picture now of the person who's in this house, the reality. And he sends this boy out. And when he sees him again, it's 20 years later, and he thought he would die. In total loneliness and grieving, and he would die in old age, sad and wanting and longing for his son. He thought that death, I want to read it to you directly. It says, he said, "No, I shall go down to Sheol to my son mourning." And it says that Jacob tore his garments and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted, said, "I shall go down to Sheol to my son mourning." Thus his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him into Egypt to Potiphar as an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. And then we have the story of Judah and Tamar. It happened at that time that Judah went down from his brothers and turned aside to a certain Adullamite whose name was Hira. There Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua. He took her and went in to her, and she conceived and bore a son, and called his name She conceived again and bore a son, and called his name Onan. Yet again she bore a son, and she called his name Shelah. Judah was in Kesef when she bore him. And Judah took a wife of his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. Then Judah said to Onan, "Go in to your brother's wife, and perform the duty of a brother-in-law to her, and raise up offspring for your brother's wife." He would waste the semen on the ground, so as not to give offspring to his brother. And what he did was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and he put him to death also. Then Judah said to Tamar his daughter-in-law, "Remain a widow in your father's house till Shelah my son grows up," for he feared that he would die, like his brothers. So Tamar went and remained in his father's house. In the course of time, the wife of Judah, Shua's daughter, died. When Judah was comforted, he went up to Timnah to his sheep shearers, he and his friend Hira the Adullamite. And when Tamar was told, "Your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear sheep," she took off her widow's garments and covered herself with a veil, wrapping herself up, and sat in the entrance to Anim which is in the road of Timnah, for he saw that Shelah was grown up, and she had not been given to him in marriage. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. He turned to her at the roadside and said, "Come, let me come in to you." For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. She said, "What will you give me, that you may come in to me?" He answered, "I will send you a young goat from the flock." And she said, "If you give me a pledge until you send it." He said, "What pledge shall I give you?" She replied, "Your signet and your cord and your staff that is in your hand." So he gave them to her and went in to her. She conceived by him. Then she arose and went away and took off her veil. She put on the garments of her widowhood. When Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adullamite, and it goes on, and the story tells us that as she was 3 months pregnant, it was said that she had been immoral. Judah was told about it. He was going to bring her out and burn her, have her burned. And she said, "I am pregnant." She said, "Identify who these things are, the signet, this cord, and the staff." When Judah identified them, he said that she was more righteous than him, since he did not give her to his son Shelah, and he did not know her again. So, very interesting story. Some people, you probably heard this and you said, "What?" This Tamar is the very lineage of Christ. Perez is the lineage of Christ, which is one of the twin sons, which came from Judah and Tamar. Meanwhile, we can go either way with this. We can think to ourselves, who could do such a thing? Well, one, he didn't know that he was sleeping with his daughter-in-law. And two, he never slept with her again. So we know that he didn't know, and we know that when he knew, he never knew her again. And also, we know that this is the lineage of Christ. So we have two extremes in this story. One, we have a Christ-like figure who runs from this sin. And two, we have nothing but the actual lineage of Christ, Judah, who keeps giving in to this sin. Yet God makes him the lineage of Christ through a woman that was not only his daughter-in-law, but had played a prostitute. The moral of this story is, no matter how many times we sin, do not give up, because God's ways are not like our ways. And God can shine through the darkness. Shabbat Shalom. Happy Sabbath. Shalom.